What is up, Marvel Snap fans? Game designer Keith here, the Cutlass Board Games channel, and after spending a lot of time in the community, both on Twitter and in some Facebook groups, I've been listening to what some of the things that people are hoping are going to show up in the patch notes, or have been hoping for some time. And so I've put together kind of a fantasy wish list patch notes where I'm going to go through what I think could be interesting ways to solve some of the problems or complaints that we have about the current Marvel Snap meta. First one, straight off the bat, is Spider-Woman. I feel like this is a completely useless card currently, and that is really unfortunate. And my proposed change for it is it becomes ongoing instead of on reveal, and enemy cards here have -2 power. Now, the reason for this is, if you have a look on the screen, if you look at Hazmat mathematically in a scenario where Hazmat is the only card that you've played and your opponent has played all 12 slots filled, then Hazmat has a humongous power swing versus energy cost ratio compared to Spider-Woman, which at most is a 5-12. Hazmat can be a 2-13. And if you are setting up a one combo, you would literally never use Spider-Woman over Hazmat, especially when you can Hazmat and Absorbing Man in the same turn on turn 6. Spider-Woman doesn't fit the exact spot for the exact thing that she does, which is kind of rough. And so rather than having it like that, instead, this fits more like an inverted Red Skull design space, where if you have Red Skull, which is 15, but your opponent gets +2 to each of their cards that are in that same lane. So if your opponent has 4 cards there, that is +8, and Red Skull is really only +7 in that lane. And then Spider-Woman does something similar, but in reverse. So you might need to bring down her power quite a bit to get to that point. But I think that is a start, and I think that is moving in the right direction for what Spider-Woman should be to fit a unique space. And before you say, what about Soulstone? That's going to show up in this list, which will further push Spider-Woman into a unique space doing this change. Now, next. No shock. Soulstone. So changing it entirely to be on reveal. There is no longer an ongoing part of the effect for Soulstone. On reveal, draw a card. Enemy cards here have -1 power. So it's basically the same effect that Spider-Woman has now on a 1/1, which, I mean, as it is ongoing, it's more consistent, but it's already currently better than Spider-Woman is. So I think doing it here means that you can shut it down with stuff like Cosmo, but it also becomes more consistent to the current Lockjaw strategy, where it comes in, it does the thing, and it goes away. That's fine. You've not lost any tempo on playing the stone. So the people that are playing the Lockjaw Thanos deck currently aren't going to be, oh no, you've ruined this card. But the upside is it's no longer a free lane win with Valkyrie. I've played a lot of Thanos lately, and the way that I play the Thanos deck is I put everything in one lane, all my big power things in the one lane, I win that lane. I put Soulstone in the other lane, and then I have Valkyrie on turn 6 or turn 7 and win that lane for free. And I think that that is a little crazy. I think doing the on reveal stops that from being a problem, unless if you are playing a Soulstone after Valkyrie, which is still kind of more even. But I think that this is part of a few changes that are pushing Thanos into a specific spot, away from the power slam kind of deck that it is right now, where it abuses Lockjaw and it gets a whole bunch of huge power things into play. Now I'm moving it more towards a more on reveal deck with the next change of Power Stone. So Power Stone no longer ongoing. So on reveal, if you've played all 6 stones, give Thanos +6 power wherever he is. So this would be one where it checks if you've played all 6 stones when it on reveals. So you had to have hit the on reveal effect after playing the other 5 stones. However, the upside is that in doing so, you could Lockjaw this, you could Wong this, you could hit it multiple times to give Thanos multiple amounts of power and potentially be really bonkers. Instead of him just slamming in and he's an 11 or is sometimes a 21, we're taking some of the power out of the stones here and doing this, but the number of games where I consistently power stone and it made a huge difference is kind of low. With this one, it's kind of like, okay, it has you know, a less consistency but a high upper ceiling, and it takes some of the power out of the Thanos deck, which I think would be an interesting thing, but it also gives it some holding power against stuff like Killmonger, where the power stone is less likely to be destroyed, and in playing it, the only thing that's going to really stop it is Cosmo. And if you're using Wong to get greedy and get extra triggers, and like Cosmo is going to be really obviously played there because they see the Wong coming. The only upside is that it makes your lockjaw value much bigger if you're playing Power Stone after you've already played Thanos. So next, we have Thanos. Now what we're changing here is we're making it 0 power. Because the Power Stone can be played multiple times, you could get it up to 18, I think, pretty easily. Or still 12. Like, just still Thanos being 12 is very good. But the Power Stone has 3 power still, because it becomes a pain with the Mr. Negative build. So, like, if you're trying to use Mr. Negative to abuse Thanos to get him to 6 already, all the stones, with the exception of Power Stone, don't change cost, right? The Power Stone becomes a 3/1 that does the effect that you really care about. And so the idea is to push this into more of a Lockjaw / Wong type deck, instead of abusing Lockjaw by turning 1 or 0 cost cards into big things and ignoring Thanos. You're focusing more on actually getting Thanos into play and doing stuff, because if you like don't complete the stone synergy, Thanos is a dead card. You don't just get to play something that is 11 power, which is like already kind of crazy. It being 8 power and just being worse than Chavez made more sense, because you had to actually put everything together. Now they've just made it so consistent where you could never play a stone and still playing 11 power on the final turn is pretty good. So hopefully this pushes it more into a specific space, and it allows more obvious counterplay. Like if you put Cosmo into the Lockjaw lane, they're going to get a lot less value out of it. But this is one of those things that you would try in testing, see how it goes in testing. It might not make a difference at all. Just looking at it from the outside and not being able to try out these things makes it very difficult to see what kind of a balance you could find. But Thanos needs some kind of a change. It is a too great a percentage of the meta to be allowed to continue in the way that it is. And so the next card is Leech, which is something that we made a video on previously, talking about some of the ideas here. And what happened with that video was I wanted to stay really close to what the original design of Leech was, keeping it in the on-reveal category. And I felt that that was a disservice to solving the problem that what they had said Leech was supposed to solve. And in holding myself back in that category, it was only until after I posted the video that I came to the conclusion of this is actually what I want Leech to be. So first of all, Leech now, with this change, would be symmetrical. It doesn't just hose your opponent for free. It also needs to sit in place so you can't abuse it with Lockjaw. And it more specifically needles down and deals with specific problems rather than just hitting whatever your opponent is holding at the time. So like currently, Leech is like, oh, you know, if your cards in hand had downsides, or if you had something like America Chavez, where the abilities don't really matter as much once it's in your hand, that sucks for me, whatever, you're largely unaffected. However, if you have anything where the design space is your power is low because your ability is high, it's now useless. And we already have things that deal with those problems, like Cosmo and Sandman. Like Cosmo deals with stuff that has really strong abilities, but I don't think we need Leech to do that as well. Instead, this Leech version deals with very specific threats that allow your opponent to abuse energy reduction mechanics, such as the Death Wave deck, where they could be potentially dumping a whole bunch of power on the final turn after having played Wave, and then you can't do anything about it. The other interesting thing is that, not listed in here, Wave's cost reduction would just make anything below 4 up to 4, and then your 5s and 6s would still cost 4, So they don't become uncastable if you play Wave on turn 5. Like, you can still play the 1/6 drop as you would have just before. But the difference is they can't also play She-Hulk. They can't also play Death. They get to just play Arrow or Magneto or whatever, which I think is way better. It also stops the Mr. Negative being able to go, okay, here's Iron Man, okay, here's Mystique, all on the same turn. They have to actually play it out. They have to go, okay, I'm going to, actually pay the 5 for Iron Man, but he becomes a 5/5. Like, it's not irrelevant. He becomes a 5/5. That doesn't suck. Like, it's still a huge boost. It just doesn't cost 0. So I don't think it's backbreaking. And then, like, Sarah and Zabu, like, if you're setting up Sarah and I'm playing Leech on the same turn, you're like, that's fine. Sarah's single ability does nothing. Like, I don't break the entire end game state for you. So I think this would be a much more balanced, symmetrical effect that allows you to interact with specific problems, which is what a tech card is supposed to do. So on that, next up is Shang Chi. Shang Chi is not one that people complain about, but I think is really dumb. So what I would change it to is this: on reveal, destroy all cards at this location that have 9 or more power. Not just your opponent's cards, everyone's cards. So if I'm overinvested in something and you destroy my thing, you're going to win that lane with Shang-Chi. But you shouldn't also just be able to have a 10 or 11 power thing there and blow up all my stuff so that you win that lane. Like, it should be symmetrical. The location in particular that I think exemplifies this the most is Monster Island. We both get a 9 power monster, and then you Shang-Chi me, you win that lane. Like, it doesn't matter, you win that lane. If it's symmetrical, you are resetting the state and also destroying something of mine if I'm greedy. And that's still really good value. So you're using Shang-Chi to win a lane that you are behind in because your opponent has overextended. Like, that is the point of the card. You can't go, I've overextended, you've overextended harder, I'm punishing you. So I think this brings it back in line with it being, first of all, more symmetrical like every other tech card. Like Enchantress, turns off all your own stuff, but you can use that to your own advantage. All those other things. And I think it gets to a more balanced space. It's much less like, oh, they had Shang-Chi. It's like, okay, good. They have to now play around. Can they even Shang-Chi the lane? Because I have a big thing, because I have to now compete with their big thing, right? It adds more design choice in where you choose to put your stuff. And I think that is a positive change for the card. And then next, we've got Arrow. So Arrow is one that people complain about a lot. And I think at the very basis, the thing that they need to change is that Arrow pulls cards in the order that they were played, which means that you playing your cards go, okay, what if I'm arrowed? I'm going to put them in this order, which is something that leader did, right? Like, even before the leader nerf, when you were getting leaded, you're like, oh, they don't have as much space as I do here. If I play my junk stuff first, that'll get copied, and my good thing last. That won't get copied, I'll win the lane. And then that was how you were able to sometimes play around leader. With Arrow, you go, I'm going to play all my stuff the best where it's supposed to go. There you go, Arrow, and the game's like, blah, 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 blah. This is where it all goes. And you're like, well, how am I supposed to interact with that? Like, even as a person playing Arrow, you're like, oh no, I took their Iron Man and the other two things, stayed where they were and won that lane, and then I have to deal with this Iron Man that I can't beat, and I lose this lane now. And like, it's the feels bad moment of losing to RNG rather than losing to a player specific choice is really shit. It should be, I lost because my opponent played correctly. Congratulations to them. They made the right choices. Not, I lost because my opponent won 2 coin flips, which I think is ridiculous and is not good competitive play inspired design. Like, you'll never see a competitive Magic card that was like, if you win 2 coin flips, good job, you've won the game. Which is kind of crazy. Like, you have to go through a sequence of things where you made good choices along the way to get to that point. Whereas this can just literally be like, all right, let's see what happens. And so I think first solving this one problem and then seeing how that goes, and people learning to be able to play around being arrowed by the way that they play the multiple different cards. Because if they're arrowing into a space that is only 1 slot open, and you play your crap thing first, they might still win that lane. And that's fine. You know, you have choices in how you're able to play around these things. whereas my current counterplay is to fill up every lane so that Aero does nothing on the final turn. But that is it. That is it for me. These are the things that I want to look at and change. At the barest, like, even if the suggestions that I have don't come into it, I think that these cards are something that should be looked at. I think Thanos needs a look at. I think Leech needs a look at. I think that the community is complaining about it enough that you would maybe want to change it. All right. That is it from me, however. Just some ideas I have about maybe changing the landscape of Marvel Snap. And I know a lot of people will complain about, oh, the game's perfect how it is. And yes, it is good. It is a good game how it is. But the other thing you have to keep in mind is that when content creators are playing this on stream for a large amount of hours a day as their job, and if they're complaining about the exact same thing, a lot of people watching them are going to pick up the same opinion because they see its effect, regardless of them actually specifically experiencing it in the game. So as a designer, you have to create both a fun broadcast experience and a fun player experience, which means you have to juggle the top end of the meta and the bottom end of the meta. And if people are going to be making videos about how shit this one card is, that's going to affect the general player's experience of the game, and I think that is worth looking into. Anyway, that is it from me. I do make a whole bunch of other Marvel Snap content. I will put some buttons up here for you to have a look at and check out some of that stuff. But I also do a whole bunch of other game design and devlogs and other stuff, like I'm making a murder mystery board game at the moment, and some of that's worth looking at too. So if any of that grabs your attention, click on some of those other buttons, because clicking on all the buttons on the screen actually helps out the channel a lot. And I'll hope to see you in whatever my next ridiculous suggestion for the game video is going to be.